Hey, welcome back to another episode of Folklore.
What's up?
This time it is me and Jason, and the reason is because Jason is probably one of the only people I know that has an encyclopedic knowledge of hip hop history.
Of Diddy parties. That no,
Specifically, well, I was going to say encyclopedic history of hip hop history that hasn't been to a Diddy party.
right, which is true. I've
Right.
never.
And I think this show we want to talk about the building blocks of culture, and you can't really do that without hip hop, and we haven't done a hip
No,
hop episode, and there's a lot of news coming out about Diddy lately, and so we could get to that later. But I think like there's several years of history that no one really talks about that builds up to this, and I think like the important thing is ultimately is and we'll see it is there was this underground sort of movement that happened East Coast and West Coast around the same time, and that became such a significant cultural movement that uh, the government had to get their hands in it somehow.
right, right.
Like it wasn't enough to just uh, let the music be the music and the artists make money. Diddy parties had to come into play, and so we'll,
I
we'll get there. We'll get
You needed that CIA money to.
well, we could talk about that too because that's actually an important part of that kind of gets overlooked. But they've been the government's been in this for a while, and it's not just the music industry. I mean, this spans Hollywood
Yeah,
and Epstein and all that sort. Like it
and
goes the whole.
and painting. The modern art movement. The CIA money that was injected there at different times. Yeah,
All
and
right. Well,
this is not I mean, it was, I think, a conspiracy, but it's not a conspiracy theory. These are things that now we have the documentation that on too. So
they've been released into the public,
right,
so
because
uh,
they have to, after a certain number of years, the things get released, and then you go, oh, that's why splatter painting suddenly got popular, because the CIA was buying splatter paintings for thousands and thousands of dollars, and so everybody was like, oh, those are selling. Here's lots of
oh, you're talking
splatter
about
paintings.
postmodern art.
Postmodern art, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I didn't know
yeah.
if you were talking about the ink blots, but but no, that's okay. Well, let's go. We'll get into that.
We'll get to
Let's
that, yeah.
start. Where did rap, hip hop? How did that start? Where did that
Yeah.
come from?
Well, you had the kind of birth of hip hop over in New York and Brooklyn and that area uh with house parties at the park, parties, and that they were spinning records to get big speakers and spin records and gather everybody together to have a good time, at a house party, at a picnic, that sort of thing. And what happened was, they would be, as you're spinning records, there are certain places in the record where the music breaks out and you just have the beat, and you had people noticing that the dancers would all jump up or jump into the middle, and you'd get more dancing during those periods, those break periods. And so you had people starting to extend those by buying two versions of the record and getting one set up, while the other one was playing. And when that break beat came in, then they would extend it again, and then they started switching back and forth. And so you got the musical vocabulary of directly attached to the dance forms that were developing. And then, like a lot of those movements, the art forms began developing around them right at the same time. And so you really had a whole Brooklyn a whole Brooklyn culture that was developing social art, dancing, music, poetry, all of it developing together in a cohesive neighborhood culture. And then they started competing with one another. And as the rest of America was losing touch on its culture, they discovered, well, Brooklyn has one. Maybe the whole country should borrow it.
Yeah,
And hip
we were
hop
kind of
kind of,
losing this. We were kind of losing disco at the time, right?
yep.
Like that
Well,
was kind of
and disco wasn't disco was manufactured by record companies in a way that made it less authentic. It didn't
oh,
feel authentic.
so disco was the faith based
Yeah.
movies of the music
Well,
industry in the '70s,
right,
right?
yeah, yeah. So you had it was formulaic, and there's some great disco out there that was produced by it, but a lot of it was formulaic. It was produced in sort of these music factories where they would pass along, um, a bass line. A bunch of bass lines would be made, and then a bunch of drum beats. Right? It wasn't created in a human sort of way, and so it felt stale and it felt manufactured. And so this very real human developed culture that was attached to real people that included a whole life, suddenly was discovered, and it bursts on the scene. It eventually bursts on the scene as a full formed, um, cultural art form, uh, that involved, a full formed culture, right? It had dance, it had music, it had poetry, it had stories, it had eventually it had movies, it had everything, um, but it was authentic. And so even the movies that weren't, Breaking Two, Electric Boogaloo, you have things like that. They're not great movies, but they're very authentic, and people loved them. Um,
Yeah, I was
I
so
started
that I
putting
was
out, yeah, putting
yeah, I was
you put
just
out the
watching the. Oh, go ahead, go ahead.
I was gonna say, everybody starts putting out the cardboard and learning to dance and learning graffiti art and rap and everything. It's because of that, how authentic it was, that it really resonates with a whole group of teenagers that weren't given very many authentic options.
Yeah, it's just funny you talk about like '70s and Electric Boogaloo and stuff because I just watched Matt Stone and Trey Parker's documentary on Casa Bonita last night, which is amazing. I thought it was just it's basically just it's basically just kitchen nightmares, but one giant. What's it like who are the ones the Chip and Joanna Gaines are doing like one big like project now like per season, but this was like one big project and one documentary. But when they're going through it, I think it was either Matt or Trey had this like amazing idea where they're trying to figure out like what the theme of the restaurant is, and they said no. And they just got the idea that it's the restaurant is in time in 1973, trying to be an 1880 Western restaurant.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
I was just like, that is the most random, amazing thing ever. So there's mix of like 19, like all the Western costumes are like disco and bell bottom themed. And that's how because they didn't want to just do a Western sort of thing.
Yeah,
And I just, anyway, so that's what like disco popped in my mind. Okay. So you have a town, you have a culture, and they're making this music, they're competing. And so what was the first like I guess big break? Because so we have DJ turntables, we have breakdancing, and then you have obviously spoken word poetry and stuff, right? So those are all the sort of things that are happening around at the same time, and then something breaks through
yeah.
that.
Well, the oddly enough, the first thing that breaks through is Heart of Glass by, Blondie, but that's not because they were taking on hip hop. It's because often the hip hop and the punk bands were playing at the same venues and they knew each other, and so they looked at rap and said, "Man, that's so cool. We want to add some to one of our songs." And so Heart of Glass breaks through. It's kind of the first. rap song, but it's not really hip hop. It's punk with and then she does some rapping. It's a new wave punk with some rapping. And but people say, what was that? And so then they start looking for more rap, and you get the a hip, a hop, a hippie to the hop, and a hip hip hop, and you don't stop, right? You get kind of commercialized rap that suddenly shows up and people love it. It was probably stolen from another rapper and then recorded over some disco beats, right? But that's how a lot of things happen when you got a bunch of people that are making really a new art form, recording it for the first time, and so you get some stuff burst on the scene, and then everybody says we need more of that, and then it really spreads, and you get movements in LA, you get movements down south, you get rap sort of showing up everywhere really really quickly. And I think my theory is people were so thirsty for masculine poetry that when masculine poetry shows up on the scene, it's like people tasting water for the first time. It spreads everywhere in every direction. There's a great new Run DMC documentary that just dropped, three part. That's really, really that documents the whole thing and shows how masculine hip hop was in that early movement, and how that's really the thing. Like that's what everybody shows up for. It's a movement full of dudes that are like, you can be artistic, expressive dudes. Let's do this, right? And so you've got, it's a very masculine art form out the
Oh
gate.
yeah, that's why the government had to show up. We can have
Right,
that.
that's exactly it, right? So they'd already done everything they could to destroy like the LA scene, the black culture in LA, by introducing crack cocaine, um and as a way to fund their international overthrow of other governments, right? So anytime you get masculine movements that make groups of men that are going to be difficult to control, the government, it, in the 20th century, the government shows up, the CIA shows up and starts to try to undermine them. And I wish that this was just a conspiracy theory, but now we know that that actually was happening.
Yeah, what was
And
the name of
it's
that project? Do you know the name of the or what was called or so
uh
people can look it up?
no, the TV show Snowfall is about it.
Okay.
Which is why it's so important to do scripted shows about historical moments, because then everybody says, wait, is this true? And then you can go look it up. Whereas if you make a documentary about it, it's going to hit the documentary folks, but it's not going to go broad the way Snowfall did,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is not. I'm not recommending it as a show. I'm interested in that history, but also the colorist of that is, I think, the greatest living colorist of the TV show Snowfall. And so if you love color in in storytelling, is the best use of
Yeah.
coloring as a
Yeah.
integrated part of the storytelling, I think, of any TV show ever.
Yeah, but the point is you have basically a true it's not a true story, it's just based on those events in
It's
history,
based
right?
on those events,
So,
yeah.
yeah, so it's narrative, it's not a biopic, it's not a documentary. It's just based on that time period and which just, and everyone's like, is that how did there's no way the government actually did that. And you go, no, they actually did that. The feds have been corrupt for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, and so okay, so LA is being destroyed, and I know you don't have a lot of time with us. By the way, if you're watching and you'd like to talk and you're an artist, Jason's going to leave in about 30 minutes, or in about 20 minutes, and then I'd like to maybe do some open calls with some artists or filmmakers or whoever and whatnot. But I'll post that link in the chat for people to come on. We'll do some open calls. We'll be risky today, and then but okay, so
Yeah.
everything's going well. Where does Diddy come into play?
Well, so what ends up happening is 91, you have the Chronic drop. 92, you have the 36 Chambers, Wu Tang, and 93 you have Nas, Illmatic, drop it, and so suddenly gangsta rap is becomes the infatuation of uh the infatuation of the American young men. And I think that is actually when you get the question of, can this group then be controlled? Is, what are we going to do? And so Diddy shows up on the scene. You've got the era of producers starts showing up. So Dre produces a bunch of other stuff. Warren G, he's got his one big hit, but then he produces a bunch of stuff. You have the era of producers begin, and you've got the Neptune brothers produce a bunch of stuff, and Diddy shows up as a producer, and he starts producing a bunch of different stuff, including Biggie kind of as a big breakout, but then a whole bunch of other stuff. And a he develops his entourage and his way of doing things, which includes these big parties. And you begin getting this kind of rumor on the street at that point that there's something weird about these Puff Daddy parties, uh, because they involve getting people in, doing stuff, and he records everything. And that's when people start going, there's something maybe wrong. One of those people that says, hey man, there's maybe something wrong is Tupac Shakur. Right? Tupac shows up and he says, Diddy can't be trusted. This guy's there's money coming from someplace else. There's
Was this after
ulterior
he met
motives.
with the feds?
After Biggie, or I mean, after Puff Daddy did.
Yes.
Yes, yes. So,
Okay.
but he's the one that starts saying that everybody look out. Don't trust this dude. I think there's federal money. I think there's something going on.
He
And
called him a Fed, right?
he
Tupac
call
called him a Fed.
he ends up calling him a Fed in public and saying that he's recording everything for some other reason than just because he likes, it's he's and and Tupac secretly starts a relationship up with Biggie and starts getting the dirt on
And,
what's
and
going
Biggie is
on.
signed with Diddy, right?
Biggie is signed with Diddy, and he starts getting the dirt what's going on, and starts saying like he's gay, like he's that's what's going on, right? And that all of this, like girls in videos and stuff, that's a cover for this right? And so and Biggie and
Hey, we're
Tupac
trying to
start
do masculine poetry here, guys. We're
right,
trying
yeah,
to do
yeah, we're
masculine
trying to do
poetry.
masculine
And
poetry
this
here,
guy,
right? Biggie's been studying he's been studying jazz and the phraseology of jazz music in order to improve his craft as a rapper and all this. And Puff Daddy's producing him, and he's gonna turn him into a big star. And then it's like, except for the dudes of Poofter. Yeah, that knowledge is being used by the CIA to manipulate him, and then he's being used as a tool in order to control uh, to control everything. Right, that's the story that begins, and Biggie and Tupac start planning a release together, and then next thing you know, Biggie shot, Tupac shot, and everybody at the time is like, Puff Daddy killed Tupac for outing him. And then it was like, no, 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 that wasn't it. There was a gang war happening, and that's and I used to, kind of laugh at people that were like, no, Tupac's still alive. Um, and I still do think Tupac is dead. But when you start looking at everything around what's going on, you realize there's a reason that people would say, I think Tupac knew what was coming, he knew what was going on, and he was planning on outing the whole business. And so If he was going to fake his own death, there's actually that story could
Yeah, there's
that
a big
story actually makes sense. And then you take into account the Tupac sightings and stuff, but I think he actually was killed, but he wasn't killed in a gang war. He
right.
was killed to keep from outing Diddy at the time. Um, Now that none of that stuff ever is going to last. So eventually it comes out. You have people started talking about it. I mean, a long time ago in public, but because word you don't do that sort of thing without word getting out. And there's all sorts of people that now are realizing, oh, I shouldn't have gone to those parties. It just seemed like fun at the time, but they were completely duped. And then you had other people that ended up in on it, and you've got guys like Kanye who started to try and tell the world about what was going on. Who who knows what has happened to Kanye?
Right.
I'm not I'm not willing to go on record
Yeah.
as to what's going on there, but he
You can read
did.
Milo. You can read Milo's Twitter threads if you want to know what
Yeah,
happened to Kanye.
right, yeah. But the different people that have tried to kind of bring things to the surface, Justin Bieber, uh, you things start to get really bad for them, um, and but they also there seems to be a direct connection between meeting Jesus and starting to tell on Diddy. So that's another thing that
That-
seems that has
yeah.
happened a number of times.
Me and my wife were talking last night about how like it seems like God's raising Bieber up just to be able to be the one, because if he's the main witness in something like that, like, everybody already uh, feels bad for him and is rooting for him and cheering him on. So he doesn't have anything to lose,
Right.
and so, but there would just be amazing testimony of God's grace. I was watching a TikTok video of his song "Lonely" last night, and I was like, "Oh man, this is brutal. It's
Yeah.
brutal." And so yeah, so I mean, there's Bieber, there's Britney Spears, there's the whole Mickey Mouse Club, like that sort of Disney sort of thing. This is just consistent narrative after consistent narrative over and over and over again. And yes, I mean, I mean that. So nobody ever comes after Diddy after all this time, and then suddenly his usefulness is up. Like what?
Yeah, that's a good question. Which I'm still, I've been paying attention to this stuff because I care about the state of poetry in America, and this has a huge effect on it.
And
Well,
art
and
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 filmmakers and
there's
artists
art,
too, right?
art and filmmakers, the whole business. So, um, and that really is the question, is because suddenly, how long ago was it? 6 months. The FBI does the first raid, right? If you remember, there was a series. It wasn't just all at once. There was an evidence gathering raid, and then an arrest raid, right? And there's been a couple of aspects to this, and but it it's I'm not sure if there are just people within the FBI that have been after this a long time. Um, and so they finally have been able to get the case together, or because I think that there's good guys in the FBI, and then sometimes there's bad guys in the FBI.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
I agree.
and or if now they said, "Oh man, we've got to get the attention off of this," and so you've got to throw Diddy to the wolves to as a scapegoat to protect everything uh, that's going on. I think.
Because then
Well,
the feds can come in and confiscate the drives and all the
exactly.
videos and stuff like that. Yeah,
Exactly. So what I'm hoping is that the reason that there was a sudden raid by the FBI early on was to keep the CIA from getting everything. Right? If they show up quick and they confiscate it all, then um, that keeps a fake. arrest and destruction of evidence from happening. That's what I'm
Well,
hoping happens, because I would
I'm
love
more
some justice for all those
I'm more
kids,
encouraged
especially.
by the civil case that just came out with 120 witnesses, 25 of which were confirmed to be underage, and they vetted all these. They had 3,000 calls, and they were able to confirm 120, and that's a civil case, so it's not going to wind him in prison, but it is going to put on record. I
Yep.
think a lot of people, and I think the lawyer said you're going to be shocked by a lot of the names of people involved, and not just standing on the sidelines afraid to say anything. And so I think that's significant. But I also think, as for what we're doing with Lore TV and that, like, we have to understand, like, there is a very, like, Hollywood is very, very controlled. You don't just become an A-lister and not sign shady contracts
Yep.
and not have to do things that they can blackmail you with. Like, the ones that are the top of the top, the ones that are making all the money, it's not strictly based on talent. A lot of it's based on
Yeah.
compromise.
Not usually. There's been a
There
handful of
are some,
people.
yeah,
Yeah. That
for
that
sure.
yeah. But yeah, it is the norm is the casting couch is the norm. Put it that way.
Right. Well, it's like, you see, I was just watching a clip today, like Norm Macdonald, right? And he's fired because he doesn't go in line with the OJ stuff for
Right.
Weekend Update. And the executive said, "Well, we fired you because you're not funny." Norm's telling this on Letterman. That was the clip I saw, and you go, "He's the greatest comedian of all time."
Yeah. He's he's if he's not in the conversation for the goat, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and even Letterman, because Norm wasn't just a comedian; he was a comedian's comedian, right? So, even Letterman's like, well,
Yeah.
Letterman said, "Oh, I know that executive. He's an idiot." But and then he goes on the View, of course. And he talks about the Clintons murdering
Oh
people,
yeah,
which is one of the classic
that's one
things.
of my all-time favorite clips because he
Yeah, and
plays
then he
dumb. He's
just
like, "Oh,
kind of
I thought everybody knew that already."
and then his show gets canceled on ABC, and then he sort of just goes in the background until podcasting and comedy podcasting, and then he blew up, and then, of course, he did the great Andy Kaufman joke of not telling anyone he was sick.
Oh
so
my gosh,
so every time someone
so
says he
it's a
died, people go,
living bit.
yeah, it's a living bit. Every time somebody, I do believe he did it on purpose, but every time so you say, "Oh yeah, Norm Macdonald, he's dead," people go, "I didn't even know he was sick." So because that was his Hitler joke. That was his
Right?
Hitler
Yeah.
joke. So I think he says, like, "Man, I sure hope Hitler regrets what he did." And people go, "He's dead." I don't even know he was sick. But anyway, just the guy's brilliant. But yeah, so you do see actors, I think, that later on in their life, like, they escape the system at the height of their careers, and then they back away, and then at the end of their life they sort of kind of come back, and people respect them, I think, probably because they know that they truly are upright people.
Yeah.
And and those usually are the legends and the goats, I think, in the long run. But when you see people like uh especially in the hip hop industry, that, like, sold out, I think of, like, Cardi B and like all, like, that era. Like, I don't think there's longevity to what they're doing. I like they don't have it. And then they're just selling the game.
Yeah.
And but it's not going to be the same as sort of talent that sort of lasts for generations,
Right.
in that sense.
Exactly.
So, like,
What?
so
Yeah. I got to bounce to my next
all right.
thing. So bring somebody on. I can't wait to
Yeah.
come back
So
and watch the rest of it.
what I'll do, you'll have to go to our YouTube. I think the way this works is you'll have to go to our YouTube channel, or it's YouTube, or this will be the first time we've tried this live. But it'll be YouTube or our Facebook page on Lore, and I'm going to post the link to be able to share it on YouTube and Facebook. So if you hop over to the YouTube page, I'll give it a few minutes, and then, you know what I'll do? I'll actually, let me. see if I can actually post this on Twitter, because I think most everybody's watching this on Twitter, right? So I'll post this on my personal I'm King Ginger Twitter. I'll post it as a thread under the thread, and then I'll delete it later, and then that way, so you should be able to see it. Um, that way, feel free to join the stream, and then if you come in and you want to be a guest, I'll give it a few minutes. But while we're waiting for someone to actually hop in, if they hop in, if you got the guts, you want to come in and talk, that's fine. Just fair warning: if you're boring, I'm going to kick you off and say you're boring. Got to keep the pace of the show up. So what I want to talk about first off in terms of updates for lore. Uh, First one is Barely Biblical episode 2 funded. It's on Ehud and Eglon. It finished last week, so congrats to Tim Mingle. Hopefully we'll be able to get some people on to talk about that soon. And then so you can watch that episode. The whole episode is available to watch. You can stream for free. Also, if you go to Lore and you just want to sign up for an account without getting a subscription, you can now do that. We call that our Bidenomics affected plan. It's a free plan. We'll occasionally put out a free video or something for you guys to watch. And I think you can go on there and you can watch the trailers for all the show if you sign up that way. And then eventually we're going to make it so that you can actually fund projects without subscribing. So go ahead and subscribe to Lore under the Bidenomics affected plan if you're not subscribed at all. And then of course, for $14 a month, you can subscribe, and that way you're able to actually fund artists right now. And so Barely Biblical episode 3 is funding. Subclass is funding, which is a great show for a preteen science fiction show. There's Esoterra episode 2 is funding. And I want to mention Prey versus Prey, which is like this. I don't think we've talked about it that much. Maybe we can get Ian on to talk about that show in the coming weeks. But that show it's a short film, just a B movie Sharknado horror film called Prey versus Prey, and the tagline is "It's hard to love your enemies when he's trying to eat you." And and so so we're putting out all these different genres and seeing like what resonates, because we don't believe the Christian genre, faith-based genre, the conservative genre, or just our genres. We think there's any filmmaker, Christian filmmaker, conservative filmmaker, should just be able to make whatever sort of more movie they want and see if there's an audience that can resonate it. That's why lore is so important, because it gets you out of that 65-year-old rom-com faith-based stuff that we've seen forever and everybody's tired of. I know you're tired of it. Everybody's tired of it. And so we're trying to change that game. And so if you're sick of faith-based and conservative movies being made for women and moms, and you actually want some masculine content for your boys, or for you as dads, or single men, or college men, that is the sort of platform we have built. And we are one of a kind. And so we are trying to build that Gen Z punk rock media brand for independent artists and filmmakers, just like MTV was, and really just sort of create that sort of thing that doesn't exist anymore. And so you can do that by subscribing to Lore. You can get a free 14-day trial, or hop on the Bidenomics plan if you're poor. That's how we say it. That's why we made it. So it doesn't look like anybody wants to come on and talk. I was hoping some artists were listening or paying attention, but that's okay. I'm not hurt. My feelings aren't hurt. There won't be a show next week because I'll be in Orlando, Florida. So we're going to take a break next week. And then the week after that, I think we're going to have a pretty big guest. I think we've confirmed, but I'm not exactly sure enough to be able to say it. But pretty big comedian guest. So hopefully we'll be able to do that the week after. It's a shorter show today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And please be sure to pass folklore on to your friends. Talk about lore, share lore. By the way, if you're signed up for lore and you use your invite link, you actually get loot that you can spend to fund show. So the fastest way to fund shows is to invite friends, and then that way we can fund shows faster. The more subscribers we get, the faster pace of funding. Pretty simple laws of economics in place. And yeah, so thanks everybody for all your support of Lore. Be sure to go to Loor.tv here, right here, and you can subscribe and get that free 7-day trial.